morning sun peeked through worn curtains as Lisa's alarm clock buzzed for the third time. She groaned and stretched her tired arms, her fingers flexing as if reaching for piano keys that weren't there. Another day, another double shift at Cafe Milano. Lisa's small apartment was neat but simple, a stack of music books piled on the coffee table, a framed photo of her graduating class from music school, and bills spread across the kitchen counter. 3 years since she had earned her degree in classical piano performance, and here she was, still waiting tables. She rushed through her morning routine, pausing only to glance at the calendar where she had circled a date 3 weeks away, the final payment on her mother's medical bills. That thought alone pushed her forward on the hardest days. Lisa left her apartment building and walked quickly through the cool morning air. The community center was just opening as she arrived, Mrs. Chen unlocking the front doors with a knowing smile. "Good morning. Lisa, the piano room is all yours." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Just an hour today." The community center's piano wasn't much, an old upright with slightly yellow keys and a few notes that stuck in humid weather. But it was the only one Lisa could access regularly, and she treated it with the same reverence she'd once shown the concert grands at school. Her fingers moved across the keys, warming up with scales before diving into the piece she'd been working on for weeks. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor flowed through the empty room. Lisa closed her eyes, losing herself in the music, her body swaying slightly as her hands created magic from memory. For this 1 hour, she wasn't a waitress worried about rent. She was the musician she'd trained to become, the one professors had called promising and gifted, the one who might have gone on to something more if life hadn't thrown so many curveballs. When her practice time ended, Lisa reluctantly closed the piano lid and gathered her things. She thanked Mrs. Chen again and hurried toward Cafe Milano, slipping through the back door with minutes to spare. "Cutting it close again," said Raj, the cook, without looking up from the grill. "But never late," Lisa replied with a small smile, tying her apron and pulling her hair back into a neat ponytail. The cafe was already filling with the morning rush. Business people grabbing coffee before work, college students with laptops, and the regulars who came for Raj's famous breakfast burritos. Lisa moved between tables with practiced efficiency, remembering regular orders and greeting new faces with a warm smile that hid her exhaustion. By midday, her feet ached and her mind wandered to the piece she'd practiced that morning. There were sections she still struggled with, transitions that needed work. Sometimes she would tap rhythms on the edge of the counter while waiting for orders, earning curious looks from her coworkers. "You're doing that thing again," said Beth, another waitress, as they restocked napkins during a brief lull. "What thing?" Lisa asked. "That finger-tapping thing, like you're playing an invisible piano." Lisa laughed softly. "Sorry, old habits." "You never really talk about it," Beth said, leaning against the counter. "Your music stuff, I mean. Raj mentioned you went to some fancy school." Lisa shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "It was a long time ago." 3 years isn't that long, Beth pointed out. Before Lisa could respond, the bell above the door chimed. A group of well-dressed people entered, led by a tall man in an expensive suit. The cafe manager, Tom, immediately straightened his tie and rushed forward. "Mr. Davidson, welcome to Cafe Milano. We have your usual section ready." The man nodded without smiling, his eyes scanning the restaurant as his group of 5 followed him to the largest table by the window. Lisa had seen him in magazines and news articles. Robert Davidson, tech billionaire and founder of Davidson Innovations. His company had recently gone public, making headlines across the business world. Tom caught Lisa's eye and motioned her over. "Lisa, you'll be handling Mr. Davidson's table today. He's a very important customer." Lisa nodded, taking a deep breath before approaching the table. She'd served wealthy customers before. The cafe was located in an up-and-coming neighborhood that attracted its share of business executives and entrepreneurs. But Davidson's reputation preceded him. Stories of his demanding nature and impatience circulated among service workers throughout the city. "Good afternoon," she said with a professional smile. "Welcome to Cafe Milano. Can I start you with some drinks?" Davidson barely glanced at her. "Sparkling water, no ice," the others ordered, various specialty coffees, teas, and waters. Lisa jotted everything down quickly and efficiently, years of experience helping her memorize who ordered what without having to ask again. As she walked away, she overheard snippets of their conversation, talk of investments, acquisitions, and a charity gala happening that weekend. The usual business talk that filled the cafe at this hour. When Lisa returned with their drinks, Davidson was in the middle of a story, his voice carrying across the restaurant. So I told him, "If you want to impress me, you need to do better than that." The piano was a Steinway Model D, worth at least $150,000, and he thought I wouldn't notice they hadn't maintained it properly. A woman in a sleek blazer laughed. "Did you still buy it?" "Of course I did," Davidson replied, accepting his sparkling water from Lisa without acknowledging her. "I had my piano technician completely restore it. Now it sits in my music room alongside the others." "How many do you have now?" asked a younger man at the table. "7, each with its own character and story." Davidson's eyes lit up for the first time since entering the cafe. "The Steinway is my newest addition, but the Bösendorfer still gets the most playtime." Lisa couldn't help herself. As she set down the last drink, she said quietly, "The Bösendorfer has such a warm tone. Perfect for romantic period pieces." The table fell silent. Davidson looked at her, really seeing her for the first time. "You know pianos?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. Lisa felt her cheeks warm as everyone stared at her. "A little," she said. "I studied piano performance in college." "And yet you're waiting tables," Davidson observed, his tone making the statement sound like an accusation. Lisa's smile tightened. "Life happens. Can I tell you about our lunch specials today?" The abrupt change of subject worked. The group ordered their meals and Lisa escaped to the kitchen, her heart pounding. She shouldn't have spoken up. Customers like Davidson didn't want to hear about their server's failed dreams. "You okay?" Raj asked, noticing her flustered expression as she clipped the order to the kitchen line. "Fine," she said. "Just a tough table." As she continued serving other customers, Lisa kept an eye on Davidson's table. The group ate and talked business, with Davidson occasionally glancing her way when she passed. She pretended not to notice. Near the end of their meal, as Lisa cleared some plates, she overheard Davidson mention music again. "The problem with most pianists today is they lack passion. They have technique, sure, but no soul. When I was in Vienna last month, I heard a performance that was technically perfect but completely lifeless." His companions nodded in agreement, though Lisa suspected they knew less about classical music than they pretended. She bit her tongue and continued working. The lunch rush began to subside, and Lisa felt relief knowing Davidson's group would likely leave soon. But as she brought their check, she noticed an old upright piano in the corner of the cafe, a decorative piece Tom had purchased at an estate sale last year. No one ever played it, and Lisa wasn't sure it was even in tune. Davidson followed her gaze to the piano. Something changed in his expression. A spark of mischief, or perhaps cruelty. "Does that old thing even work?" he asked loudly. Tom, overhearing, hurried over. "It's mostly decorative, Mr. Davidson. Adds character to the place." Davidson looked from the piano to Lisa, then back again. A smile spread across his face that made Lisa uneasy. "I have a thought," he announced to his table, his voice carrying throughout the now quieter cafe. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her the day was about to take an unexpected turn. The cafe had grown quiet, with only a few tables still occupied after the lunch rush. Robert Davidson's voice carried easily in the calm atmosphere as he looked from Lisa to the old piano in the corner. "You know," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm always on the lookout for hidden talent. You'd be surprised how many people claim to be musicians." His companions chuckled as if he'd shared an inside joke. Lisa felt her stomach tighten as she placed the check folder on their table. "Will there be anything else?" she asked, hoping to escape the uncomfortable attention. Davidson tapped the folder without opening it. "You mentioned studying piano performance. Where exactly?" Lisa hesitated. She'd learned that sharing too much personal information with customers often led to awkward conversations, but Davidson was staring at her expectantly, and Tom, her manager, hovered nearby, clearly wanting her to keep their important customer happy. "Eastman School of Music," she finally said. "I graduated 3 years ago." A murmur of genuine surprise passed through Davidson's group. Eastman was well known in music circles as one of the top conservatories in the country. "Impressive," Davidson said, though his tone suggested skepticism rather than admiration. "And now you're here serving coffee." One of the women at his table, A sharp-featured executive type raised an eyebrow. Life's full of disappointments, isn't it? The comment stung, but Lisa had heard worse. She maintained her professional smile. Is there anything else I can help you with? Davidson's eyes drifted back to the piano. Actually, yes. He pulled out his wallet and extracted several crisp $100 bills, placing them on the table. I'm curious about something. The cafe had gone completely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch. That piano, Davidson continued, pointing to the old upright. Does it work? Tom stepped forward eagerly. It does, Mr. Davidson. We had it tuned just last year when we got it. It's mostly for show, adds a nice touch to the place, but it's playable. Davidson nodded thoughtfully. Perfect. He turned back to Lisa, his eyes glinting with challenge. I'd like to make a little wager. Lisa felt trapped in the spotlight. Every customer was watching now, and her co-workers had stopped pretending to work. I don't gamble, sir, she said quietly. Not even when the odds might be in your favor? Davidson pushed the money forward. $500 says you can't play anything worth listening to on that piano. A flush of heat crept up Lisa's neck. The amount was more than she'd make in a week of double shifts. It was tempting, but the humiliation if she failed would be unbearable. I'm working, Mr. Davidson. I can't just— It's fine, Tom interrupted, clearly seeing a potential spectacle that might bring attention to his cafe. Take 5 minutes, Lisa. If Mr. Davidson wants to hear you play, I'm sure we can accommodate that. Davidson smiled triumphantly. Wonderful. So what do you say? 500 if you impress me. Nothing if you don't. Simple enough. Beth appeared at Lisa's side, taking the empty glasses from Davidson's table. Go on, Lisa, she whispered. What's the worst that could happen? Lisa thought of many answers to that question. Public humiliation. Losing her job if Davidson complained she wasn't good enough. Reinforcing the painful truth that her dreams of being a concert pianist were fading further away with each passing year. But looking at Davidson's smug face, another emotion began to surface. Determination. This wealthy man thought he could toy with her for his entertainment, assuming she was just another failed artist with empty claims about her talent. All right, she said, surprising herself. But I choose what to play. Davidson's smile widened. Of course. The piano is all yours. Lisa untied her apron and handed it to Beth. The short walk to the piano felt like crossing an ocean. She could feel every eye in the cafe on her, could practically hear the thoughts of the onlookers. This should be interesting. Poor girl, is she really going to try this? The piano bench was dusty when she sat down. She adjusted it slightly, muscle memory from thousands of performances guiding her movements. The lid creaked as she opened it, revealing yellowed keys that had clearly seen better days. She placed her fingers on the keys, testing a few notes quietly. The piano was out of tune, but not terribly so. It had a warm, if slightly muted tone that reminded her of the one her grandmother had owned. What should she play? Something flashy to impress Davidson right away? Something subtle that would build to show her technique? She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment to center herself. When she opened them, she began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece she had practiced that morning, filled the cafe. She started softly, letting the familiar melody flow from her fingers as naturally as breathing. The introduction was deceptively simple, but Lisa knew what was coming. The technical challenges, the emotional sweeps, the moments that had made this piece a test for pianists for generations. As she moved into the main section, her confidence grew. Her fingers remembered every note, every dynamic shift. The cafe and its customers faded away. There was only the music, the story it told, the emotions it evoked. She forgot about the money, forgot about Davidson and his challenge, forgot about the years of struggle since graduation. For these moments, she was simply a musician again, doing what she had been born to do. The old piano came alive under her touch, its imperfections adding character to the performance rather than detracting from it. When she reached the technically demanding sections, her fingers flew across the keys with precision and passion. The piece built to its thunderous climax, and Lisa poured everything into it, her frustrations, her hopes, her love of music that had never died despite everything. As the final notes faded, Lisa remained still, hands hovering over the keys. The cafe was utterly silent. Then someone began to clap. It wasn't Davidson. It was an elderly man sitting alone by the window, tears glistening in his eyes. Others joined in, first hesitantly, then with growing enthusiasm until the small cafe echoed with applause. Lisa turned on the bench to face her audience, her cheeks flushed with emotion. The customers were standing, including a family with 2 young children who stared at her in awe. Raj had come out from the kitchen and was applauding with a wooden spoon still in one hand. Beth was wiping tears from her eyes, and Davidson was staring at her with an unreadable expression. Lisa stood up and straightened her uniform, suddenly self-conscious again. She walked back to Davidson's table, her legs feeling slightly unsteady. "Well," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "Was that worth listening to?" Davidson studied her for a long moment. The cafe had grown quiet again, everyone waiting for his verdict. His companions looked between him and Lisa with newfound interest. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he finally asked, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance. "I told you. Eastman." Lisa met his gaze steadily. "But I've been playing since I was 4. My mother cleaned houses so I could take lessons." Davidson nodded slowly. "You didn't just study piano. You mastered it." He pushed the stack of bills toward her. "This was a poor wager on my part." Lisa didn't reach for the money. "I didn't play for your money, Mr. Davidson." "Then why did you play?" Lisa thought about it for a moment. "To remember who I am," she finally said, "even if just for a few minutes." Something shifted in Davidson's expression, respect perhaps, or understanding. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, placing it on top of the money. "Take both," he said. "The money because you earned it fair and square. The card because someone with your talent shouldn't be waiting tables." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Call my office tomorrow. I have some people you should meet." His companions looked surprised, exchanging glances as they gathered their things. Davidson left a generous tip on the table, separate from the money he'd offered Lisa, then headed for the door with his entourage trailing behind. At the threshold, he paused and turned back. "By the way, what was that piece?" "Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor," Lisa replied. Davidson smiled, a genuine smile this time. "I'll remember that. And I'll remember you, Lisa." After they left, the cafe erupted in excited chatter. Customers who had never spoken to Lisa before came up to congratulate her. Tom looked dazed but pleased by the excitement in his cafe. Beth hugged her tightly. "Are you going to call him?" Beth asked, nodding toward the business card. Lisa picked it up, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Robert Davidson, CEO, Davidson Innovations, and below that, a direct number handwritten on the back. "I don't know," she said honestly. But as she slipped the card into her pocket, something she hadn't felt in a long time flickered in her chest. Hope. Lisa finished her shift in a daze. News of her performance spread quickly through the cafe, with customers who had missed it asking if she would play again. Tom, suddenly seeing promotional potential, suggested she could perform regularly on weekends. Everything felt surreal, as if she'd stepped into someone else's life for a few hours. "You should have seen their faces when you hit that crazy part," Beth said, as they cleaned tables after closing. "That rich guy's friends looked like they'd seen a ghost." "I still can't believe I did that," Lisa admitted, wiping down a table with more focus than necessary. The $500 in Davidson's business card were safely tucked in her wallet, though she'd glanced at them several times during her shift, half expecting them to disappear. Raj emerged from the kitchen, his apron removed and replaced with a worn leather jacket. "My cousin recorded some of it on his phone. It's already got a couple hundred views online." Lisa's head snapped up. "What?" Raj pulled out his phone and showed her a social media post. The video quality wasn't great, filmed from a side angle, but there she was playing Chopin on the cafe's old piano. The comment section was filled with surprised reactions and praise. "I didn't realize anyone was recording," she said, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "You'll probably be famous by morning," Beth teased. "Hey, don't forget us little people when you're playing in fancy concert halls." Lisa laughed, but the comment stirred something inside her. For years, she'd packed those dreams away so carefully that even thinking about them felt dangerous, like opening a box that might release both hope and disappointment. "I should get home," she said, hanging up her apron. "It's been a long day." The walk to her apartment felt different tonight. The same streets, the same buildings, but Lisa moved through them with a lighter step. She found herself humming the Chopin piece, fingers tapping rhythms against her thigh as she waited at crosswalks. Her small apartment welcomed her with familiar silence. Lisa set her keys on the counter, next to the stack of bills that hadn't magically disappeared during her shift. The reality of her situation remained unchanged despite the afternoon's events. She took a quick shower, changed into comfortable clothes, and made a simple dinner. All normal routines, yet her mind kept drifting back to the cafe, to the piano, to the feeling of music flowing through her again in front of an audience. After eating, she took out Davidson's card and studied it. The direct number he'd written on the back seemed to stare back at her. Should she call? What would come of it? She'd met enough wealthy people during her student performances to know that their enthusiasm often faded quickly, replaced by newer interests. Lisa picked up her phone, then set it down again. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. 3 years of practical decisions, of setting aside her passion to deal with real-world responsibilities. 3 years of telling herself that music would always be there, even if only in stolen moments before work. Her mother would have told her to call. "Always walk through doors that open," she used to say. "You can always walk back out if you don't like what you find." Lisa thought of her mother's hands, weathered from years of cleaning other people's homes, yet still graceful when they braided Lisa's hair or turned the pages of a music book. Her mother had sacrificed so much for Lisa's education. Would she want to see her daughter serving coffee for the rest of her life? With sudden resolve, Lisa picked up her phone again and entered the number. It was evening now, well after business hours. She'd probably get voicemail, which seemed easier somehow, less intimidating than an actual conversation. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Davidson. The voice that answered was unmistakable. Lisa froze. She hadn't expected him to answer personally. "Hello?" he prompted. "Mr. Davidson," she managed. "This is Lisa from the cafe today." A pause. "The pianist," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I was hoping you'd call." "You said I should call your office tomorrow," Lisa said, still surprised she was speaking directly to him. "Did I? Well, tomorrow, today, doesn't matter. What matters is that we talk about your future." Lisa perched on the edge of her sofa. "My future?" "Yes, tell me something, Lisa. Why aren't you performing professionally? With your talent, you should be on stage, not serving lunch." The question was direct, almost blunt, but without the condescension she'd heard in the cafe earlier. She considered giving him a polite, simplified answer, then decided on honesty instead. "My mother got sick during my senior year," she said. "Cancer. I graduated, but instead of pursuing performance opportunities, I came home to take care of her. The medical bills piled up. She passed away a year later, and by then I was deep in debt and out of the performance loop." Lisa took a breath, surprised at how easily the story flowed to this stranger. "I keep telling myself it's temporary, that I'll find my way back to music eventually." Davidson was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry about your mother," he finally said, his voice gentler than she'd heard it before. "But 3 years is a long temporary." Lisa couldn't argue with that. "I have a proposition for you," Davidson continued. "The Richardson Foundation, my charitable organization, is hosting a gala this Saturday night. We raise money for arts education in underserved communities. Our scheduled pianist canceled this morning due to a family emergency." Lisa's heart began to beat faster. "And you want me to fill in?" It would be a 20-minute performance during cocktails, nothing too demanding. "We pay our performers, of course, $5,000 for the evening." The amount made Lisa's head spin. $5,000 would make a significant dent in her remaining debt. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Davidson replied, "and then tell me if you have appropriate attire for a black tie event, or if that's something we need to arrange." Lisa glanced down at her worn sweatpants and t-shirt. Her performance wardrobe consisted of one simple black dress from her college recitals, now years out of style. "I might need some help with that," she admitted. "Not a problem. My assistant will contact you tomorrow with details. Do you have a current repertoire prepared, or should we discuss options?" The conversation continued, becoming more technical as they discussed music selections suitable for the event. Lisa found herself warming to Davidson as he revealed a genuine knowledge of classical music and thoughtful opinions about what would work for the gala audience. "I'll have a car pick you up at 5 on Saturday," he said as they wrapped up the call. "The gala starts at 7, but I'd like you to have time to practice on our piano beforehand. What kind is it? Lisa couldn't help asking. The Bösendorfer, Davidson answered, and she could hear the smile in his voice again. I think you two will get along nicely. After they hung up, Lisa sat motionless on her sofa, trying to process what had just happened. A paid performance at a gala. Playing a Bösendorfer grand piano worth more than she would earn in years at the cafe. Her phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. Contract and details will be emailed tomorrow. Looking forward to Saturday. Art, it was real. This was happening. Lisa jumped up and paced her small living room, excitement and anxiety battling inside her. Could she pull this off? It had been 3 years since she'd performed formally. What if she embarrassed herself? What if this was just a rich man's passing fancy, soon to be forgotten? She stopped pacing and took a deep breath. Then she walked to her bookshelf and pulled out her collection of sheet music, dusty from disuse. The piece she'd played today had come back easily enough, but she would need more for a 20-minute performance. For hours, she sat cross-legged on her living room floor, sorting through music, making lists, considering options. Which pieces would complement each other? Which would showcase her strengths? Which would appeal to an audience of wealthy donors? It was nearly midnight when a knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Beth still in her cafe uniform. You forgot this, Beth said, holding up Lisa's worn backpack. You left it under the counter. Oh, thank you for bringing it by. Lisa took the bag gratefully. Did you walk all this way just for that? Beth shrugged. It was on my way home from my second job. Plus, I wanted to see if you'd called that rich guy yet. Lisa couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. I did, and you're not going to believe what happened. She pulled Beth inside and closed the door, suddenly desperate to share the news with someone. As she described the upcoming gala performance, Beth's eyes grew wider. $5,000? For one night? Beth collapsed onto Lisa's sofa. That's more than I make in 2 months, I know. It doesn't seem real. Beth looked around at the sheet music scattered across the floor. Well, it looks real to me. You're already preparing. She picked up one of the pieces. Is this what you're going to play? Maybe, I'm still deciding. Beth set the music down carefully, then fixed Lisa with a serious look. You know this could change everything, right? If these rich people like you, who knows what might happen next? Lisa nodded slowly. The possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. One step at a time, she said. For now, I just need to make it through Saturday night without throwing up on $1 million piano. Beth laughed and Lisa joined her, the tension of the evening dissolving into hopeful anticipation. After Beth left, Lisa gathered up her music and finally went to bed, though sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of pianos and glittering ballrooms and audiences that transformed from admirers to critics and back again. In the morning, she would need to ask Tom for Saturday off. She would need to prepare, to practice, to face the possibility that after 3 years of hiding her talent, she might be about to step back into the world she thought she'd lost forever. As she finally drifted towards sleep, a thought floated through her mind. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a challenge from a stranger. Saturday arrived with alarming speed. The days between Lisa's phone call with Davidson and the gala had passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Tom had been surprisingly supportive when she asked for time off, especially after hearing about the performance opportunity. This could be good advertising for the cafe, he'd said with a wink. Maybe we'll put up a sign, home of piano prodigy Lisa Chen. Lisa had spent every free moment practicing. The community center piano had become her second home, with Mrs. Chen even giving her a key so she could practice after hours. Her fingers were sore and her back ached, but muscle memory was returning, bringing with it a confidence she hadn't felt in years. Now, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, Lisa hardly recognized herself. Davidson's assistant, a brisk woman named Patricia, had arrived the day before with several garment bags. Mr. Davidson suggested these options, Patricia had explained. Whatever you don't choose will be collected tomorrow. The dresses inside were more elegant than anything Lisa had ever owned. After trying each one, she'd selected a deep blue gown with a modest neckline and flowing skirt that wouldn't restrict her movement at the piano. Patricia had also provided shoes, a small evening bag, and a simple necklace that caught the light when Lisa moved. You look like a real pianist, Lisa whispered to her reflection, then laughed at herself. She was a real pianist. She always had been, even when serving coffee. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Car arriving in 10 minutes. Patricia. Lisa took a deep breath, gathered her sheet music, and took one last look around her apartment. Whatever happened tonight, something told her things would be different afterward. The car was sleek and black with tinted windows. The driver, a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, opened the door for her with a respectful nod. "Good evening, Miss Chen. I'm Howard. I'll be taking you to the Richardson Foundation Gala tonight." The drive to Davidson's estate took them through neighborhoods Lisa had never visited, where houses grew larger and spaces between them wider. Howard drove smoothly, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "First time playing for the foundation?" he asked kindly. "First time playing anywhere in 3 years," Lisa admitted. "I'm a bit nervous," Howard smiled. "I've driven many musicians to Mr. Davidson's events. The nervous ones always give the best performances. I hope that's true." They turned through an impressive gate and followed a winding driveway lined with carefully pruned trees. The house, mansion really, appeared ahead, its stone facade glowing in the early evening light. Staff members moved purposefully around the entrance, arranging flowers and adjusting lighting. Howard pulled up to a side entrance. "The main guests won't arrive for another hour. This will give you time to settle in and practice." Patricia was waiting when Lisa stepped out of the car. She wore a sleek black pantsuit and carried a tablet, looking every bit the efficient assistant. "Right on time," she said approvingly. "Let me show you to the music room. You can warm up there before moving to the grand ballroom when guests begin to arrive." Lisa followed Patricia through corridors lined with art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. The house was a maze of luxury, each room more impressive than the last. Finally, they reached a room with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a manicured garden. And there it was, the Bösendorfer grand piano, its polished black surface gleaming under carefully positioned lights. "Oh," Lisa breathed, unable to say more. "Mr. Davidson had it tuned yesterday specifically for your performance," Patricia said, checking something on her tablet. "There's water on the side table. Someone will come for you when it's time to move to the ballroom." With that, she left Lisa alone with the magnificent instrument. For a moment, Lisa just stared at it. Bösendorfer pianos were legendary for their rich tone and responsive action. She'd played one exactly twice in her life, once during a master class in college, and once at a competition where she'd placed second. Slowly, she approached it, running her fingers lightly over the fallboard before lifting it to reveal the keys. Perfect ivory and ebony stretched before her, promising possibilities her old practice pianos could only suggest. Lisa set her music on the stand, though she'd memorized every note. Then she sat on the bench, adjusting it to the perfect height. The room was silent except for her breathing. She began with scales, simple exercises to feel the action of the keys and the response of the instrument. The piano sang under her touch, rich and warm and perfectly in tune. She moved to arpeggios, then to more complex patterns, testing the piano's range and her own ability. It was like reuniting with an old friend, one who had been waiting patiently for her return. Lisa lost track of time as she rehearsed portions of her program, making small adjustments for the piano's unique voice. She was deep in a particularly challenging passage when a throat cleared behind her. She turned to find Robert Davidson standing in the doorway, dressed in an immaculate tuxedo. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "I just wanted to check how you were settling in with the Bösendorfer." Lisa smiled. "It's incredible. Thank you for letting me play it." "The piano has been waiting for hands like yours," Davidson said, walking into the room. "Most of our performers are technically proficient, but few connect with the instrument the way you do." Lisa felt herself blush at the compliment. "I've selected a program that should work well for a cocktail hour. Some Chopin, of course, but also Debussy and a bit of Gershwin to lighten things up." Davidson nodded approvingly. "Perfect choices. The crowd tonight includes serious music lovers and those who wouldn't know Bach from Billboard's Top 40. Something for everyone." He glanced at his watch. "Guests are beginning to arrive. Are you ready to move to the ballroom?" Lisa gathered her music. "As ready as I'll ever be." The grand ballroom took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with classical scenes. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed gardens now lit with thousands of tiny lights. Staff in black and white uniforms moved efficiently around the room, setting up a bar and arranging flowers. Another Bosendorfer, identical to the one in the music room, waited on a slightly raised platform at one end of the ballroom. Two Bosendorfers? Lisa couldn't help asking. Davidson smiled. This one usually stays in the ballroom for events. The other is my personal instrument. I thought you might prefer to warm up somewhere quiet, a thoughtfulness she hadn't expected from him. Guests began to arrive. Women in designer gowns and men in tuxedos, many wearing jewelry that probably cost more than Lisa's entire education. They mingled and chatted, accepting champagne from trays carried by circulating servers. Patricia appeared at Lisa's side. We'll begin in 5 minutes. Mr. Davidson will introduce you briefly, then it's all yours. Lisa nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. She'd performed hundreds of times during her studies, recitals, competitions, master classes. But 3 years was a long time to be away from the spotlight. Davidson stepped onto the small platform and gently tapped a glass for attention. The room gradually quieted. Good evening, friends and supporters of the Richardson Foundation. As you enjoy your cocktails tonight, we have a special treat. Our scheduled pianist had a family emergency, but fortune brought us someone extraordinary instead. He gestured toward Lisa, who walked to the platform with what she hoped was professional confidence. I discovered Ms. Lisa Chen playing in a cafe of all places. Davidson continued. Her talent deserves a far grander stage, and I'm delighted to share it with you tonight. Please enjoy. With that, he stepped down, leaving Lisa alone with the piano and a room full of curious strangers. She sat at the bench, adjusted it slightly, and took a quiet breath. Then she began to play. She started with Debussy's Clair de Lune, its dreamy quality perfect for setting a sophisticated but accessible tone. The piano responded to her lightest touch, carrying the delicate melody throughout the large room. Lisa kept her focus on the music, though she was aware of the room gradually growing quieter, as people paused their conversations to listen. By the time she transitioned to Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the audience had become surprisingly attentive for what was meant to be background music. She lost herself in the performance, each piece flowing naturally into the next. The Bosendorfer seemed to anticipate her intentions, its rich bass notes and clear treble bringing depth to every phrase. For 20 minutes, Lisa was no longer a waitress who used to play piano. She was simply a pianist, doing what she was born to do. She finished with Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, adapted for solo piano, a showpiece that combined classical technique with jazz-inspired rhythms. As the final notes faded, the room erupted in applause. Lisa stood and offered a modest bow, surprised by the enthusiasm. This was supposed to be background music, yet people had stopped their conversations to listen. Many were even approaching the piano now, champagne glasses in hand. Magnificent, said an older woman in a diamond necklace. Where do you usually perform, dear? Before Lisa could answer, another guest jumped in. Are you recording anything currently? My husband is friends with someone at Capitol Records. Questions and compliments swirled around her. Business cards appeared from evening bags and jacket pockets. Lisa accepted them somewhat dazed, unused to this kind of attention. Davidson materialized at her side, smoothly fielding some of the questions and giving her space to breathe. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Chen will be available to chat throughout the evening, but perhaps we can give her a moment to rest after such a beautiful performance. He guided her gently away from the crowd toward a quiet corner where a server waited with a glass of water. You were remarkable, Davidson said quietly. I knew you were good from what I heard at the cafe. But this... He shook his head in apparent wonder. Thank you for giving me this chance, Lisa said, sipping the water gratefully. This is just the beginning, Davidson replied with a smile that suggested he knew something she didn't. The night is young, and there are several people here you should meet. As he led her back toward the crowd, Lisa realized that for the first time in 3 years, she was thinking about possibilities rather than limitations. Something had shifted inside her, as if a door long closed had suddenly swung open, and she was ready to step through. The weeks following the gala passed in a whirlwind that left Lisa breathless. That single evening had set in motion changes she could never have predicted when Davidson first walked into the cafe. The morning after the gala, Lisa had awakened to find her phone filled with messages. Davidson had sent her payment, not just the promised $5,000, but an additional $2,000 as a quality bonus. Several guests from the event had reached out through Patricia, requesting Lisa's contact information for private events, and most surprisingly, the director of the City Symphony had left a voicemail. "I was at Robert's gala last night," the message said. "We're looking for a soloist for our spring series. Let's talk." Lisa had played the message 3 times, certain she'd misheard. The City Symphony was prestigious, with soloists typically booked years in advance. It seemed impossible that they would consider her based on a cocktail hour performance, but the call had been real, and the meeting that followed even more surreal. The symphony director, an elegant woman named Diane, had listened to Lisa play, asked about her background, and then offered her a 3-performance contract on the spot. "We'll need to begin rehearsals next month," Diane had said matter-of-factly, as if she hadn't just changed Lisa's life forever. Now, sitting in her apartment surrounded by moving boxes, Lisa was still trying to process everything. The cafe had thrown her a goodbye party yesterday, with Tom presenting her with a card signed by all the staff and regular customers. Beth had hugged her tight, making Lisa promise to leave tickets for her first symphony performance. "Don't forget us, little people," Beth had joked, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. "Never," Lisa had replied, meaning it. The cafe had sustained her through the darkest period of her life. She would always be grateful. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lisa stepped carefully through the maze of boxes to answer it. Davidson stood in the hallway, looking strangely out of place in her modest apartment building despite his casual attire. "Ready for the grand tour?" he asked. Lisa grabbed her jacket and keys. "As ready as I'll ever be." The housing arrangement had been Davidson's idea. When he learned that Lisa's lease was ending, he'd mentioned a building his foundation owned that provided subsidized apartments for artists. Lisa had initially refused, uncomfortable with accepting more help, but Davidson was persistent. "It's not charity," he'd explained. "The foundation established this program years ago. The building is walking distance from the symphony hall, has soundproofed rooms for musicians, and costs less than what you're paying now. Turning it down would be financially irresponsible." He'd had a point, and after seeing her bank account drained by the security deposit for her current apartment 3 years ago, the reduced deposit for the artist housing was too practical to refuse. Now Davidson led her through the renovated historic building, pointing out features with evident pride. The apartment itself was larger than her current place, with tall windows that filled the rooms with light. But the feature that took Lisa's breath away was in the main living area, a baby grand piano, not new but beautifully maintained. "This isn't standard in the apartments," as she said, running her fingers lightly over the fallboard without opening it. "No," Davidson admitted. "This is on indefinite loan from my collection. Consider it an investment in your future performances." Lisa shook her head in amazement. "Why are you doing all this? You barely know me." Davidson was quiet for a moment, looking out the windows at the city skyline. "My mother was a pianist," he finally said. "Not professionally, she taught elementary school music, but she played beautifully." He turned back to Lisa. "She died when I was in college. Cancer, like your mother." "I'm sorry," Lisa said softly. "After she passed, I found myself collecting pianos, hiring musicians to play at events, donating to music education programs. My way of keeping her memory alive, I suppose." He shrugged slightly. "When I heard you play at the cafe, you reminded me of her. Not your style, that's all your own, but the way you connected with the music, as if you and the piano were having a conversation no one else could quite hear." The personal revelation surprised Lisa. Davidson had always seemed so businesslike, even when discussing music. "Thank you for telling me that," she said, "and for everything else. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Play," he said simply. "That's all the repayment I want. Play for audiences who appreciate what you can do. Teach students who need to learn what you know. Keep music alive in a world that increasingly treats it as background noise." Lisa nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the responsibility and the opportunity before her. "Now," Davidson said, his tone becoming lighter, "the moving company will bring your things tomorrow. Patricia has arranged for the paperwork to be delivered this afternoon. I believe you have a rehearsal to prepare for, so I'll leave you to get acquainted with your new piano." After he left, Lisa stood in the empty apartment, feeling as if she were in a dream. 6 weeks ago, she had been a waitress with fading hopes and mounting bills. Now she had a symphony contract, private bookings that would pay more in a weekend than she'd made in a month at the cafe, and a beautiful apartment with a piano of her own. She walked to the instrument and finally lifted the fallboard. The keys gleamed, awaiting her touch. Lisa sat on the bench and began to play, not a performance piece, but a simple melody her mother had taught her when she was very young. The piano's voice was warm and responsive, filling the empty apartment with memories and possibilities. As she played, Lisa thought about the strange path that had led her here. If Davidson hadn't come to the cafe that day, if he hadn't been arrogant enough to challenge her, if she hadn't been brave enough to accept, any break in that chain would have left her serving coffee, practicing in stolen moments, and slowly letting go of her dreams. Sometimes life turned on such small moments. 3 months later, Lisa stood backstage at the Symphony Hall, her heart pounding. Through the curtain she could hear the orchestra tuning, the murmur of the audience finding their seats. Her hands were cold despite the warm backstage area, performance nerves familiar from her student days but more intense now. Tonight wasn't a school recital or even a competition. Tonight was her debut as a professional soloist with the City Symphony. She wore a new gown, deep purple with subtle beading that caught the light. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup perfect. She looked the part of a concert pianist, but part of her still felt like an imposter. What if the audience saw through her? What if they wondered why a cafe waitress was on their stage? A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes, Miss Chen. Lisa nodded, trying to control her breathing. She had prepared thoroughly. She knew Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 intimately. Every note, every nuance, every moment where the piano would join with or rise above the orchestra. Still, the doubt persisted, until she felt a hand on her shoulder. Lisa turned to find Beth standing there, looking somewhat out of place in her new dress but beaming with pride. "You've got this," Beth said, hugging her quickly. "Just like at the cafe, but with fancier clothes." Lisa laughed, tension breaking. "Thanks for coming. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss it. The whole cafe crew is out there. Tom closed early so everyone could attend." Warmth filled Lisa's chest, chasing away the remaining nervousness. Her cafe family had come to support her. "Plus," Beth added with a grin, "your rich friend Davidson bought out a whole row for us." Before Lisa could respond, Diane appeared, elegant in her conductor's black. "It's time," she said. Lisa took a deep breath, squeezed Beth's hand once more, and followed Diane toward the stage. As she walked out into the bright lights, the audience applauded politely. Lisa spotted her cafe friends, Davidson in the third row, and many faces from the gala. She settled at the gleaming concert grand, adjusted the bench, and nodded to Diane that she was ready. The orchestra began the famous opening chords of the Rachmaninoff. Lisa's hands hovered over the keys, waiting for her entrance. In that suspended moment, she thought of her mother, who had sacrificed so much to nurture her talent. She thought of the cafe, which had sustained her through grief and uncertainty. She thought of Davidson's unexpected challenge that had changed everything. Then the moment came for the piano to enter, and Lisa began to play. Her doubts fell away, replaced by absolute certainty. This was where she belonged. This was who she had always been, even when life had temporarily led her elsewhere. A pianist. A musician. An artist reclaiming her voice. The music soared through the hall, carrying with it the story of a journey home.